It is 2 in the morning and you are still awake, not tossing, not turning, just lying there with your eyes open in the dark, staring at a ceiling you cannot see, replaying a sentence someone said to you 6 hours ago as if it just happened. Your chest is tight, the kind of tight that sits right under the collarbone and does not move no matter how deep you breathe. Your phone is somewhere near your hand, screen dark now, but you already know the shape of it in your palm, because an hour ago it was glowing and you were scrolling through nothing, looking for something that would make the noise in your head stop. It did not stop. It never does. You have tried counting sheep. You have tried the apps with the calm voices. You have tried telling yourself to just relax. And every single time the thought comes back anyway, dressed a little differently, wearing a new excuse to visit you again. Maybe it is the conversation from work. Maybe it is a decision from years ago that still gets replayed at full volume every time the house goes quiet. Maybe it is nothing at all. Just a formless dread sitting on your chest with no name and no shape. And that is somehow worse, because you cannot even argue with something that has no face. I am not going to tell you to relax tonight. I am not going to hand you another breathing trick and call it a solution, though we will get to the breath, because the breath matters more than you think. What I want to give you first is something else. Something I did not understand myself until I had spent years in complete silence, sitting with my own mind with nowhere to run and nothing to distract me from it. By the end of what I'm about to share with you, you will understand exactly why every single thing you have tried to fight your anxious thoughts with has quietly failed you. And you will understand the one shift in thinking that makes those thoughts lose their grip, not through force, not through distraction, but through something so simple you will wonder why nobody ever told you before. And I promise you this, the way I am going to show you tonight will not ask you to go numb, will not ask you to stop caring, will not ask you to pretend your heart does not feel what it feels. It is safe for your heart. It is safe for your sleep. It simply removes the one thing that has been keeping the thought alive. My name is Wynn. For most of my life, I lived behind the walls of a small mountain monastery in near total silence for decades, doing nothing that the modern world would call productive. I did not build anything. I did not sell anything. I watched my own mind hour after hour, year after year, until I began to see the machinery underneath the suffering that every single person carries, whether they wear robes or suits, whether they live on a mountain or in a city apartment with 3 screens and a calendar full of meetings. I broke my silence because I kept meeting people quietly at the edges of that mountain who were carrying the exact same weight I once carried, and who had been told the exact same wrong instructions about how to put it down. So now I speak, not because I have all the answers, but because I have seen, with my own eyes and my own sleepless nights, what actually works and what only looks like it works. The force that is sitting on your chest tonight has a name, and once you see it clearly, you will start noticing it everywhere in your life. It is the mind that refuses to live where your body actually is. Your body is here, in this bed, in this room, in this exact moment, but your mind is somewhere else entirely, replaying a conversation that already ended, rehearsing an argument that has not happened yet, worrying about a version of tomorrow that may never arrive at all. This mind, always leaning backward into what already happened, or forward into what has not happened, is the true engine behind almost every anxious night you have ever had. And here is my promise to you. Stay with me until the end of this. Because the anxious thought you are carrying right now, the one that keeps circling back no matter what you do, will not survive the understanding I'm about to walk you through. it will not survive it. Because thoughts like that do not run on willpower, and they do not run on distraction. They run on something else, something you have been feeding without even realizing it. And once you understand what that fuel actually is, you will finally know how to withhold it. Here's what you probably believe, because almost everyone believes this, and almost everyone is taught to believe it by a world that loves quick fixes. You believe that an anxious thought is an enemy, and that the way to deal with an enemy is to fight it, push it away, argue with it, tell it to stop, distract yourself hard enough that it cannot find you. You believe that if you are strong enough, disciplined enough, if you just try hard enough, you can force the thought out of your head the way you would force an intruder out of your house. I need you to hear this clearly, because it is the single most important reversal in everything I'm going to teach you tonight. That belief is the reason nothing you have tried has truly worked. You are not dealing with an intruder. You are dealing with something closer to a fire. And there is one thing every fire needs to keep burning, one thing and one thing only. And it is not your weakness, and it is not bad luck, and it is not a flaw in your character. It is your attention. Every time you fight a thought, you're handing it more of exactly what it needs to survive. Every time you argue with it in your head, you're adding fuel to the very fire you're trying to put out. This is not about them, whatever situation or person your mind keeps circling back to. It is not even really about the thought itself. It is about where your attention keeps landing, again and again, without your permission. And that is exactly why force has never worked for you, no matter how hard you tried. Tonight, I'm going to walk you through what I found on the other side of years of sitting with this exact struggle. I am going to show you the mechanism behind why the anxious mind loops the way it does. The same mechanism, whether the thought is about a person, a decision, your health, or nothing you can even name. I am going to give you the practice I use myself, the breath and the phrase, the two small physical tools that let you actually apply this teaching in the middle of the night, in the middle of a tense meeting, in the middle of the very moment your phone lights up your face in the dark. And somewhere near the end of this, I'm going to tell you about the night I almost lost everything to this exact pattern. The night that changed how I understood my own mind forever. So stay with me, because that part alone might be the thing you needed to hear tonight. Let us start with the mechanism, because if you do not understand why the mind loops, no technique will ever stick for long. Picture a small ember, the kind left glowing faintly after a fire has mostly died down. Left alone, untouched, that ember will lose its heat within minutes. It has no more logs to burn, nothing left to consume, and so it simply fades into ash and cold. But the moment someone leans down and blows on it, even gently, even without meaning any harm, that ember flares back up, bright and hungry again, ready to burn for a while longer. Your anxious thoughts behave exactly like that ember. Left alone, truly alone, without you leaning down to blow on them with more thinking, more analyzing, more replaying, they lose their heat far faster than you have ever given them credit for. But almost nobody leaves them alone. The moment a worried thought arrives, most of us do the human thing. We lean in and blow. We ask ourselves, why did this happen? What does it mean? What should I have said instead? What if it happens again? What if I am the problem? What if I never fix this? Every one of those questions feels like problem solving. It feels responsible, even virtuous, like you are doing the work of understanding your own life. But underneath, what you are actually doing is repeatedly blowing on the same ember, keeping it alive far longer than it was ever designed to burn on its own. Tell me something honestly in the comments. before we go further. Has this ever happened to you? Lying awake, replaying the same 5 minutes of your day, as if watching it on a loop that will not stop rewinding? I want to know, because I suspect almost everyone reading this has lived through exactly that, and there is something quietly relieving about realizing you are not the only one whose mind does this. This is the mechanism the ancient teaching points to when it speaks of the second arrow. The first arrow is the actual event, the hard conversation, the mistake, the loss, the uncertainty about tomorrow. That first arrow, the pain of the moment itself, is unavoidable. Life will always send it. But the second arrow, the one that does the deeper damage, the one that keeps you awake at 2 in the morning long after the actual event has ended, is the arrow you fire into yourself again and again, every time you relive the pain in your own mind. The tradition teaches that most human suffering does not come from the first arrow at all. It comes from the second, third, fourth, and fifth arrows we fire into our own chest, hour after hour, thinking we are protecting ourselves by staying alert to the danger, when really we are just wounding ourselves over and over with a danger that has already passed or has not even arrived yet. Here is why this matters so much for you tonight. If suffering came only from the first arrow, from the actual event, then fighting the thought might make sense because you would be fighting something real and present. But you are not fighting something present. You are fighting a replay, a rehearsal, a ghost of something that either already happened and cannot be changed, or has not happened yet and may never happen at all. And a ghost cannot be defeated by force because it is not actually there to be defeated. It only has the power you keep handing it through attention. This is the first great reversal. You do not need to win a war against your anxious thought. You need to stop supplying the war with soldiers. Let me bring this into your body for a moment because this is not just a mental idea. It is something you can feel directly tonight, right where you are lying. Notice the tightness in your chest right now, if it is still there. Notice it without trying to fix it, without trying to push it away. Just notice it the way you would notice the weather outside a window. Now notice the thought that keeps circling. Do not argue with it. Do not try to solve it. Simply notice that it is there, the way you would notice a stranger standing at the edge of a room. Someone you did not invite in, someone who is only powerful in this room, because you keep walking over and starting a conversation with them. What happens if, instead, you simply acknowledge their presence and let them stand there, unattended, unfed by your attention? This is not avoidance. Avoidance would be pretending the stranger is not in the room at all, distracting yourself so hard with noise and screens that you never even look at what is bothering you. This is the opposite of avoidance. This is looking directly at the thought, acknowledging it fully, and then crucially choosing not to keep feeding it more fuel through analysis, argument, or resistance. There is something else worth understanding here because it explains why so many people who try hard to stop thinking about something end up thinking about it even more. Picture telling yourself firmly, "Do not think about the ocean." The instant you say it, the ocean appears in your mind anyway, waves and salt air and all, because the very act of forbidding a thought requires you to first summon it in order to know what you are forbidding. This is exactly what happens when you tell yourself, "Stop worrying about this. Stop thinking about that conversation. Stop being anxious." Each command drags the very thought you are trying to banish right back to the center of your attention, wrapped now in the added tension of failing to obey your own order. This is why gripping a thought tightly, even in the name of getting rid of it, only tightens its hold on you. The old teaching calls this the trap of grasping. The truth that whatever the mind seizes with force, whether in love or in resistance, it binds itself to more tightly, not less. Letting the ember cool is not about forbidding the thought from existing. It is about no longer seizing it the moment it rises, no longer demanding that it leave before you will allow yourself to rest. The ember does not only glow at night, it flares up during the day too, quietly in the middle of ordinary moments, standing in line at a store, sitting in traffic, staring at an email you have not answered yet. The same practice applies there, though the setting changes. When you notice your jaw has tightened or your shoulders have crept up toward your ears without your permission, that is the ember catching light again in broad daylight. Instead of waiting for it to build into a full spiral, pause exactly where you are. Feel your feet on the ground beneath you. Take one slow breath in through the nose and one long breath out through the mouth, and silently offer yourself the same phrase. This is not mine to carry right now. You do not need a quiet room or a cushion or perfect conditions for this. The practice was never about the setting. It was always about the half second of attention right before the mind chooses whether to lean down and blow on the ember or to simply let it sit. This brings us to the practice, the actual tool you can use tonight in this exact bed with this exact tightness in your chest. It begins with the breath, because the breath is the one part of your nervous system that speaks both languages, the language of the body and the language of the mind, and it is the fastest bridge between the two. Breathe in slowly through your nose for a count of 4. Hold that breath gently for a count of 4. Not clenched, just held, like cupping water in your hands without spilling it. Then release the breath slowly through your mouth for a count of 6, letting it be longer than the inhale. Because a longer exhale is what tells your nervous system, physically, chemically, that the danger has passed, that it is safe to soften. Repeat this pattern for several rounds. You will feel your shoulders begin to drop from your ears, even if only slightly. You will feel the tightness under your collarbone loosen its grip, even if only by a fraction. This is not magic. This is your own body responding to a signal you are finally sending it clearly, instead of the mixed signal of a racing mind trapped in a body pretending to sleep. While you breathe, there's a phrase I want to give you, one you can say silently to yourself in your own voice. In the exact moment the thought tries to pull you back into the loop. The phrase is simple, and I want you to notice how different it feels from fighting. You say to yourself, this is not mine to carry right now. Not I am wrong to feel this, not I need to stop thinking about this, not there is something broken in me for still hurting over this. Just, this is not mine to carry right now. You're not denying the pain. You are not claiming the event never happened or never mattered. You are simply setting down for this moment the compulsion to keep replaying it, keep analyzing it, keep firing the second arrow into your own chest over and over. You can pick it back up tomorrow if you need to. You can think it through in the daylight, with a clear head, maybe even with someone you trust sitting across from you. But right now, in this bed, at 2 in the morning, with your body finally asking for rest, this is not yours to carry. There is one more piece of the mechanism worth naming clearly, because it changes how you relate to the thought itself, not just to the ember it feeds. Most anxious thoughts arrive already fused with a story about who you are. The mind does not simply say, that conversation was uncomfortable. It says, that conversation proves I always say the wrong thing, or it proves I am too much, or it proves nobody can be trusted, or it proves I will always be alone with this. Notice how quickly a single passing event turns into a verdict about your entire identity. This fusion is what gives an ordinary thought its teeth. A cloud passing through the sky is only frightening if you mistake it for the sky itself, if you forget that the vast, open, unbothered space around the cloud is what you actually are, and the cloud is only ever a visitor. The old teaching calls this remembering your true nature, not as a mystical phrase to recite, but as a practical reminder in the middle of a hard night. You are the sky, not the weather passing through it. When the thought arrives, dressed as a verdict about your worth, you can meet it with a quiet correction, spoken silently to yourself. This is a thought, not a fact, and certainly not the whole truth of who I am. That single distinction, thought versus fact, has ended more sleepless nights for the people I have sat with than any technique I could ever teach them. I want to walk you through exactly where to use this, because a teaching without an application is just a nice idea that evaporates by morning. The first moment is the one you already know, lying in bed with the mind spinning. The instant you notice the loop beginning, the same conversation, the same worry, circling for the third or fourth time, that is your signal. Not a signal to fight harder, but a signal to breathe, low and slow, and to say the phrase, and to let the ember cool instead of leaning down to blow on it again. The second moment is the phone in the dark. You know this one intimately, the reflex to reach for it the instant your mind gets uncomfortable, scrolling through other people's curated lives while your own nervous system stays lit up and alert, absorbing more input instead of settling. The teaching here is not that the phone is evil. It is that the phone is another way of blowing on the ember disguised as relief. The practice is to notice the reach for it, and in that half second before your hand moves, breathe once, low and slow, and ask yourself honestly whether you are reaching for comfort or reaching for another log to throw on a fire you're trying to put out. The third moment is the one that surprises people most, because it does not happen in bed at all. It happens right after a tense conversation, a difficult meeting, an exchange with someone that left you rattled. This is often where the ember gets its biggest breath of oxygen, because our minds love nothing more than replaying a conversation and rewriting our own lines, imagining the perfect response we should have given, imagining the argument we should have won. Every one of those replays feels productive in the moment, like you are preparing yourself for next time. But notice how many times you have already replayed old conversations from years ago and never once landed on peace from doing so. The rehearsal does not protect you. It only keeps the ember burning long after the actual conversation has ended and the other person has likely moved on with their day. The practice here is the same. A breath, low and slow, and the phrase, "This is not mine to carry right now," applied the moment you notice yourself walking back into a room that has already emptied. There is a second layer to this teaching, one that goes a little deeper than the breath and the phrase, and it has to do with what you believe a thought actually is. Most of us walk around assuming that if a thought is loud enough, urgent enough, insistent enough, it must be true, or at least important enough to obey. But a thought arising in the mind is not proof of anything. It is closer to weather passing through a wide open sky. Clouds can look enormous, dark, threatening, and yet the sky itself is never harmed by any cloud that passes through it. The sky does not need to fight the cloud or convince the cloud to leave. The cloud simply moves on its own if the sky does not grab hold of it and try to keep it in place. This is one of the oldest understandings in this whole tradition, the understanding that everything, every feeling, every circumstance, every thought is impermanent by its very nature. Nothing stays. Nothing is fixed. The anxious thought that feels like it will never end tonight is, by its own nature, already changing, already softening, already on its way out, the instant you stop gripping it tightly enough to hold it in place. There is one more image that has helped many of the people who come to find me at the edge of that mountain, and I want to leave it with you before we move on. Imagine your mind as a small house with the door slightly open, and imagine each anxious thought as a guest who wanders up and knocks. You do not have to slam the door in their face. You do not have to fight them off the porch. You can simply see them standing there, nod, and choose not to invite them inside to sit at your table for the next 3 hours. Most nights, we do exactly the opposite. The guest knocks once, and we not only open the door, we pull out a chair, pour them a drink, and ask them to tell us their whole story in exhausting detail. Of course, they stay for hours. We invited them to. The practice tonight is simply this. You can see the guest standing at the door. You can even feel compassion for why they came. And you can still choose, gently and without cruelty, not to let them in tonight. If any part of what I am sharing tonight is bringing you even a small amount of peace, even just enough to loosen your shoulders a little, consider staying close to this channel. I bring a new teaching like this one every week, drawn from the same silence I spent decades sitting inside, and I would be glad to have you here for the next one. This is where people sometimes misunderstand the teaching of impermanence and think it means nothing matters, that you should not care about anything because everything ends anyway. That misunderstanding causes real damage, and I want to correct it clearly right here because it matters. Impermanence does not mean nothing matters. It means the opposite. It means this exact moment, this exact conversation, this exact chance to rest matters enormously precisely because it will not last forever in this exact form. Impermanence is not a reason for numbness. It is a reason for presence. And it is also the quiet promise underneath everything I'm telling you tonight. Because if your anxious thought is impermanent by its very nature, then you do not actually have to destroy it through force. You only have to stop holding on to it long enough for its own nature to do what it was always going to do anyway. Soften, fade, and pass, the way every cloud eventually does. The way every fire eventually burns down to cold ash when nobody keeps feeding it. Let me address the promise in the title directly, because I do not make promises like that lightly. This approach is safe for your heart, because it never asks you to stop feeling. It never asks you to numb the parts of you that are tender, that grieve, that miss someone, that fear failure, that want to be loved and understood. Those feelings are not the enemy here, and nothing I am teaching tonight asks you to silence them. What we are separating is the feeling itself from the repetitive, circular thinking that gets attached to the feeling like a leash. You can feel sadness fully, completely, with your whole chest, without spending 3 hours rehearsing every detail of why you are sad. You can feel fear about tomorrow without spending the entire night constructing every possible disaster scenario in vivid detail. The heart stays open. It stays honest. It stays alive to what it feels. Only the compulsive replay loses its grip, and that is precisely what makes this safe for your sleep as well, because sleep was never actually being disturbed by your feelings. It was being disturbed by the loop. I also want to name the fourth moment, the one that catches people off guard because it does not feel like anxiety at all in the beginning. It feels like responsibility. It is the moment you wake in the middle of the night and reach not for your phone, but for your mental calendar, running through tomorrow's obligations, the emails unanswered, the choice you still have not made about something that matters. This one disguises itself well because planning feels productive and productivity feels safe. But notice the difference between genuine planning, which is brief, clear, and ends with a decision or a written note, and anxious rehearsal, which circles the same 3 tasks for the 40th time without ever landing anywhere useful. If you find yourself circling the same 3 items for more than a minute or two without progress, that is no longer planning. That is the ember again, wearing a more respectable disguise. The same breath, the same phrase, the same gentle refusal to keep feeding. It applies here exactly as it does with any other shape the anxious mind takes. Let me tell you about a night years ago before I understood any of this, because I did not arrive at this teaching by reading it somewhere and deciding to repeat it to you. I lived it the hard way first. There was a season in that mountain monastery when a decision I had made years earlier, involving someone I cared about, came back to visit me every single night for months. I would sit in meditation during the day, appearing calm to anyone who saw me, and then the moment the candles were out and the hall went silent, my mind would drag me straight back into that decision, replaying it from every angle, punishing myself with questions that had no answers, convinced that if I just thought about it hard enough, long enough, I would finally arrive at peace through sheer mental effort. I did not sleep properly for what felt like an entire season. I grew thin. I grew short-tempered with the very people I had devoted my life to serving. And one night, exhausted past the point of pretending, I simply stopped fighting. Not because I found some sudden wisdom, but because I had no strength left to keep fighting. I lay there, chest tight, mind circling, and for the first time I did not lean down to blow on the ember. I let it sit there, ugly and uncomfortable, without trying to fix it, without trying to argue with it, without trying to be at peace with it either. I just let it be what it was, unattended. And within what felt like only a few minutes, though it may have been longer, I felt something shift. Not a dramatic release. Nothing like fireworks, just a quiet loosening. Like a hand that had been clenched for months finally, slowly opening. That was the night the teaching stopped being an idea in my head and became something I trusted in my body. I am not telling you this so you admire me. I am telling you this so you know that even someone who has devoted an entire life to this practice still had to learn it the hard way, in the dark, exhausted, with nothing left to fight with. I want to be honest with you about something else too, because honesty matters more to me than sounding impressive. This is not a switch you flip once and never think about again. The mind that lives in the past and the future does not disappear after one night of breathing and one phrase repeated to yourself. It softens with repetition. Some nights the phrase will work almost instantly, and your chest will loosen within a few slow breaths. Other nights the ember will feel stubborn, and you may need to return to the breath again and again before sleep finally comes. That is not failure. That is simply what practice looks like. The same way a muscle does not become strong after a single afternoon of effort. Be patient with yourself the way you would be patient with someone you love who is learning something difficult. And I want to say this clearly, with the same seriousness I would use if you were sitting across from me instead of watching a screen. If what you are carrying is not ordinary, anxious rumination, but something heavier, a sense of hopelessness that will not lift, thoughts of harming yourself, or a grief and pain so acute that you feel unable to function, please do not try to carry that weight alone with only a breath and a phrase. That kind of suffering deserves the support of a professional, a counselor, a doctor, or someone you deeply trust sitting with you in person, and reaching for that kind of help is not a failure of practice or a failure of faith. It is one of the wisest and most courageous things a person can do for themselves, and nothing about this teaching is meant to replace it. What I am offering you tonight is a tool for the ordinary, exhausting 3 in the morning loop that almost everyone carries. It is not a substitute for real care when the weight is more than ordinary. Of everything we have walked through tonight, the breath, the phrase, the ember, the guest at the door, I am curious which one will actually stay with you once you close this video. Some people find the breath is what they reach for first. Others find the phrase alone is enough to loosen the grip. There's no wrong answer here, only the one that meets you where you already are tonight. Before we close, I want to return to that ember one more time, because I think it is the image that will stay with you longest after this video ends. Every night, when the anxious thought arrives, and it will arrive because that is simply what minds do, remember that it needs your breath to keep burning. It cannot sustain itself. It never could. The moment you stop leaning down to blow on it, giving it your analysis, your arguments, your midnight scrolling, your rehearsed conversations, it begins on its own without your effort to cool. Not because you defeated it, not because you are stronger than it, but because that was always its nature, to rise and to pass, like every cloud that has ever crossed a wide open sky. Your only task tonight is to stop feeding it, breathe low and slow, say the phrase quietly to yourself, "This is not mine to carry right now," and let your body do what it has been trying to do for hours, which is simply rest. Tell me in the comments, honestly, what is the thought that visits you most often at 2 in the morning? You do not need to explain the whole story. Just name it in a single line, because naming it out loud, even just for yourself, is often the first small act of setting it down. Next time, I want to sit with you through something harder still. The moment you finally let go of someone you have been holding on to long after they were ever meant to stay, and the exact teaching that finally made it possible for me to open my hand. Until then, sit with this. Let it change you.